The ghosts are moving tonight, restless, hungry.
Hello internet, hello Team Dark, cheers. Lovely. I'll turn that banner off at the bottom because it's bloody annoying. But yeah, it's just to remind you that the links to the campaigns are in the description below. If you've not backed Tales of Dark or signed up for Tales of Mystery and Imagination, please think about doing it, or at least sharing them out there on social media, because that really helps. Please do that, guys. So yeah, I know you're probably expecting Wullie and Stato at the movies. That's usually a Thursday night thing, but I've gone back to my old comic book Gold roots, and I've morphed it into Wullie's movie Gold, and we're going to have a little interview show with a lovely man from the independent movie sector. Somebody I think you're going to enjoy listening to. He's got some really interesting stuff out there, and he's working on some fantastic, well, you can't really see it, it's an invisible thing he's working on. I'll tell you all about it when I get him in, I'm sure. So we've got Stato, my man, good to see you. You take care of the chat. Ashen, hey mate, hope everything's good. And indeed, not my monkeys, not my circus. Good evening, I hope you're joining me this evening, as you usually do. It's a Tabnavulin I'm having tonight, with just a wee tablespoon of water in it to open it up. You're probably on the grouse, I know that. Right, okay, so before he decides to leave, because I'm sitting here talking and drinking whiskey on my own, I'm going to bring in our guest for tonight. So everybody say hello. Shout it out from your living rooms to Mr. Paul Dudbridge. Get your name right, Paul. Hello there. How are you doing?
I'm good. Yeah.
And indeed, not my monkey is drinking some famous grouse. So yeah, thanks for agreeing to do this tonight. I've been following you on Twitter, and a friend of ours, a member of Team Dark in the chat, Mr. Pete Bakewell, who follows you on Twitter as well. He's kind of like he's getting me into all the new independent filmmakers and stuff out there, because there's just so much going on, and you're right in the thick of it. So it's great to have you here tonight for this show.
Thank you.
And first things first, I mean, you're a filmmaker, you work in the independent sector. Looking at your filmography, you do a little bit of everything, right? So first thing I want to ask you is, like, why filmmaking? What was it that got you interested in becoming a filmmaker, specifically one that essentially likes to be involved in the cinematography, the script writing, the directing, everything really?
Okay, well, my journey started back, I think I was about 11, and my parents were big movie watchers, and they got me watching movies on a Saturday night. We'd go rent the Betamax videos, and we would watch The Raiders, The Lost Ark, and the Ghostbusters and Star Wars and all that kind of stuff. And I just really loved, I remember my dad would make comments when we were watching the movie. It'd be an action film, and the car would skid around the corner, and he'd go, "Oh, you can see they've done that before," because there would be 3 or 4 skid marks on the road. And I'd be like, "What do you mean they've done that before?" It was really kind of a weird comment to make.
Yeah.
And I remember quite vividly, actually, there was 2 points in my young life. There was one, I used to play football as a kid when I was about 10 or 11, and I started to be interested in movies. And I remember on a Friday night, I was sat on my bed reading the Back to the Future 2 novelization, and my mum was calling me from downstairs to say, Paul, you need to go to football practice, and we're leaving now. And I wanted to stay and read the Back to the Future 2 book, not go to football practice. And this was that divide between leaving football behind and going into movies. And then shortly after that, I bought the poster magazine for Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. And I remember reading behind the scenes, and there was a part on there where it said, he's in Vienna, and he walks through the door of the library, and in one cut, we're on a stage in Pinewood as he walks in. And I remember thinking, but that can't work because his hair would be different and the lighting would be different. And I'm just trying to get my head around the fact that it was two different locations for one scene. And then I started to realize how movies were made and how they were shot out of order and all this kind of stuff. And I just got this big interest. And it was when I was 11, 1989, we made our first film. My dad had a video camera for filming sports days and stuff. And we took it off him and started making our own films. And that was the beginning of the journey, really, making these short films. And that was all shot in camera. That wasn't edited.
Yeah.
And the music was on a Get a Blaster stereo that my sister would press play on the music. And then when we cut the camera, we'd have to hit pause.
Excellent.
And it was that sort of thing, really. And then we just evolved. And then you start writing your own stuff, shooting your own stuff, getting other people involved. And eventually you kind of go, okay, we got some money for this, or we need to hire this particular person we haven't worked with before, and it just starts growing. And that was the journey, really. And just writing your own stories, because in order to make films, you had to write the script.
Yeah.
And then you realize that in order to sort of say, hey, let's film at this location and let's have this prop and let's meet at this time and you need to turn up, you're producing.
Yeah.
You're actually taking the role of the producer. Sorry, my iPad's going up.
Oh.
Sorry, dude.
It's okay, no problem. If it's important, feel free to take it.
No. I thought I turned it off. So that you're producing, you're doing your own thing. And that's where the journey started for me. And that's where we are today. So that was
excellent. It's funny you mention that, because I've watched in the last few weeks, months, kind of. I've watched the entire first season of Kojak, and you can see in practically every episode tires on the tarmac for every chase sequence that is in that show. I remember that as well when I was a kid watching it too. But Not My Monkeys, it seems this is like deja vu for him, because he's felt the same way about everything there. I think for me, because you mentioned the script change from going from exterior to an interior and how things are different. I think as a kid, the first time I became aware of that is because in the UK with the BBC, watching Doctor Who, and the exteriors were always completely different from the interiors, because one was made in videotape and one was made in film. Yeah. So even as a kid watching, you'd be like, why is it grainy and dull in this scene and then not so grainy in the other scene, and trying to work out exactly what was going on there. But I decided that I would go for comics and try and do that. Which is a lot more creative. It's a lot more solitary, don't need to deal with lots of people. But so what was your first real kind of into making a production that was actually going to be seen by a lot of people after you've been making all your we'll call them student films? They're not really, they're just your...
Yeah, throughout school we'd make films and then we'd show it in like the tutor period, where we had a longer session in the morning, and I'd show it to my class. And then what are we talking? Then I made a couple of films that you would hire out the local cinema or screening room, and you would sell tickets to get people there. I think the first thing for me, I made a film about 20 years ago where I had an actress in the movie who worked locally at the television workshop at ITV, which is like a drama training school. And I started making films with them, and I made a short film with them that they put on they broadcast, and they put it on TV. So that was the first short film that I'd done that went straight to broadcast, which was really good. And they wanted to make more short films after that. And then things just kind of went from there, really. But that was probably the first film that you had to follow through. You know, you're talking proper professional broadcast quality cameras, grading, lighting. You're working with another crew that you perhaps don't know personally, and that was all an education, because it's, you know, dealing with people that are older than you or got more experience than you, and then the egos come in, and then some people work with you and say, hey, look, I know what you're trying to do, let me help you. Other people are like, no, this is how it's done, what you want to do is wrong. And it's like they're into that old school, the TV news kind of thing, and I'm like, well, this is drama, something different. So sometimes it would be helpful, sometimes it wouldn't be, but it was all a lesson, it was all good learning curve. So that was probably it. That was about 2002 where that happened. So
I feel it's always good to learn the sort of like the techniques from people that have been doing it for decades or however long, even if they're not exactly the way you want to go with things, you know. So it's good to get that as a basis.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you mentioned Spielberg there, and we had a wee chat before we came in as well. But what films or even TV did you watch and think, I want to make stuff like that? I want to be like that. Any directors or any kind of genres specifically that kind of talk to you?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up on the Spielbergs, Robert Zemeckis, you know, Romance in the Stone, Indiana Jones, those kind of adventure movies that I liked, that would mix the spectacle plus a bit of family plus some heart. So yeah, Spielberg kind of had that covered. And then and my director at the moment that I've really admired for the last sort of 10 years is Ridley Scott. I just love how prolific he is and the different types of movies he does. But there was one show growing up, well, I say growing up, you know, when did that start? 94, which was really had a big impact on me, was a show called ER, and a medical drama. And it just, I love the frantic pace. I love the you know, the conflicts. I love the way it was shot. I love the element of heart. It was just, I just loved every moment. And I would learn a lot from that. You would just pick up the way that the directors are shooting it, the way they're filming things. And I remember one scene, there was a thing where there was a father whose wife had just given birth and then she died, and he was holding this baby in this kind of patient room, and the camera just was on his face, and it just pulled back through these doors out into the corridor, and all these people were crossing in front, and it was just this really sad scene of this father with this baby being left for some privacy as the hospital kind of continued out as business. And I was like, oh my god, look what they're doing, they're just pulling back, and we're still on him, but there's all this busyness in the foreground, and he's really having this private moment, and music cued in. And I was like, you start to learn all these techniques, and you start picking up these things, and you just learn from shows like that, really, and films that you like.
It's actually, because I remember we watched that all the time. I remember it being it's kind of been forgotten a little bit, but it was very influential in the way that it filmed episodes and the way that it linked stories together. I think there were quite a lot of American shows at the time that were actually trying things that were a bit different, a bit more cinematic, but still dealing with very kind of like human stories.
That's what I'd like to take from things, is actually have that spectacle or have that big, you know, event thing, and then put the human element and the human, you know, kind of heart.
Well, I think that's got to be there for every film. If it's not there, that's a film that just don't work. They can be pretty to look at. They can have lots of really good technical and artistic people involved in them, but if that's lost, then what's the point? I think Not My Monkeys picked Jaws with lots of exclamation marks when I asked you about the films that influenced you. But you did ask a nice question here, one that I'm going to let him ask you. It is a tough industry to get into.
Yeah. I think it is, but it's just, you know, I'm just a firm believer in just keep going. And I heard this great quote once from Anthony Hopkins, where he gets asked all these questions from actors going, how do you get into the industry? How do you get in the industry? And he said the same thing, which I kind of adopted there, where he just said, you just keep going and going and going and going. And he said, eventually other people that are trying fall by the wayside, and they leave and they try other things, and they fall at those hurdles. Some fall at the first hurdle, some fall at the 10th hurdle. But eventually, if you keep going, by default, you find yourself in the lead if you just keep moving forward and you just adopt, you know. And I think it's a real juggle between the craft. I think it's 50-50 between knowing the craft and knowing what you have to do technically, what's going on in the industry, but then 50% of it is psychology, working with other people, dealing with that self-doubt, dealing with the passion, dealing with, you know, whatever you need to do. It's a big minefield emotionally, you know, your mental health, your physical health, and just keep moving forward and all of that. You know, you might work for a long time on a certain project and it falls apart, or that thing that you've been looking forward to, that movie shoot, doesn't go the way you wanted it to. You know, all those things that you have to deal with. And if you can't deal with it, you leave the industry. And if you can, you kind of try and, you know, avoid that problem on the next one. And that's the way, unfortunately, you know, you have to, that's the way it's done, really, I think.
Yep. Yeah, I did a little bit of Amdram stuff back in the day, theatre stuff, and some things that have been forgotten or misplaced somewhere. But yeah, it's not an easy thing to kind of even get to grips with when you're involved in it. So it's getting into a mindset, especially when you're doing anything that's maybe going to be filmed, or you're sitting around a lot and waiting for stuff to happen and so on. So there's that aspect also, along with what you talked about there. So I think there's a certain drive you need. It's like you really that's the thing you want to do if you're going to go there. Cool. I've got Ashen saying, I think he's saying knows what film influenced me. And is that right, Ashen? We're talking about the Evil Dead here, aren't we? We are, yes. We did a show about the Evil Dead a few weeks ago, which was quite good fun.
Great.
And we're going to meet up at some point, and we're going to do the Ash TV show as well.
Right, okay.
Looking at that. So I've got asked Pete Bakewell, who can't make it here tonight in the chat. Guys, you're probably wondering where he is because he's always in the chat. He's lucky Pete. He's at Fright Fest, so he's probably sitting watching some brand new horror movie right now, even as we speak. And he's got some. He's asked me. I asked him whether he ask any questions. He's got a few here, so going to use them. And you produced a movie. Is it The Horror of Hobbs House? I believe you were a producer on that, weren't you?
I was one of four of the producers.
One of the four producers on that, because that was a rather good. We filmed that, by the way. I've got it on the DVD, so I can recommend that. It says your upcoming Fear, the Invisible Man. It says it looks like the classic British horrors that Hammer and Amicus used to make, or they might be making if they were making those kind of movies today, rather than doing what weird stuff it looks like they're doing. He thinks it's great that you and the likes of Charlie Steeds and Dark Temple Films are really flying the flag for UK horror. He says, do you guys keep an eye on each other's work, help each other out with actors, locations, that kind of thing? Is there like a community between you guys?
I mean, there is a community, but not necessarily. I don't know Charlie at all, really. I mean, I know his work, and I think he knows me, and we've got a few people that are in common. And I've seen a couple of his films, and, you know, through the grapevine, you'd hear that an actor you know has just been on his film or whatever. But Charlie's so prolific. I think he's doing about a movie a week. He's just...
I checked, because I checked the website, and I was like, Mike Jenks, there's another one. Yeah.
And they're all getting, you know, I saw today, I think he's got a Blu-ray release of one of his films in, like, France and stuff. So, I mean, he's really getting the distribution. He's really getting his movies out there. And he's just, you know, I don't know how he does it, to be fair. I don't know. Like, I think he's got a slightly small crew. I think he's got like 5 or 6 people that you might work with. And I think that size crew, you can work really fast and you can turn them around really quickly. But I think he's doing really, really a lot of work, very prolific filmmaker. So yeah, best of luck to it. I think
cool. So much like Hammer Amicus here, you're not really working together.
No, we're not working together.
Cool. No, I think it's because he was mentioning you've got a lot of the same actors jumping between you guys, and that's what it is. Sure. But, talking about Hammer and Amicus and that, your current film that you're working on is in post-production now, isn't it?
Yes, it's in post.
And that is Fear the Invisible Man.
Yeah.
Because Pete was asking about why a period piece, and I was thinking the same thing. But I was also thinking Britain's just got a really good tradition of making period films.
They have. I mean, okay, so this came to me about 3 years ago. The executive producers offered it to me and said, look, we've got this movie, and the script was already written, and that it was a period thing. And I love period movies. We do it very well over here. I mean, I even like stuff like, Downton Abbey. I love that period, and I think it sells quite well. The Americans love it, and I love the Victorian era. I think it's great. I love the look and the feel and the fog and the colors and the costumes and all that kind of thing. So immediately it gives the film a little bit of a prestige. It gives it a little bit of a class, I think, and then we can work our story into that. Obviously, budget-wise, it kind of adds up, because every time you turn the camera on, someone's in a period costume or a prop or anything like that. You can't just shoot. Even if you went into the woods and shoot some pickup, your actor still has to be in period costume or whatever it might be. So that, the film came to about 3 years ago. We shot it in April, finally, after we had issues with COVID and a few finance and fundraising issues. Finally got the money, and then we shot it, and now we're in post. So we're basically, the film's, probably 90% there from an editorial standpoint, and we're just working on all of the visual effects now, and we're going to be doing that until up to Christmas, if not past Christmas. And it's just all visual effects. It's just
Excellent.
And the visual effects range from The Invisible Man. It ranges to replacing skies, making locations more period, to painting out light switches that are in the house that we filmed in. Or we did one the other day where we had our lead actress and our police detective talking, and in the background I saw this little white car drive by. So that's got to be gone. That goes to our visual effects department, and they have to paint that out. So it's just immense, the amount of visual effects that we're doing, and that's where we are with it. But I'm really loving the movie. I'm really loving the way it's come together. I'm working with a co-editor, my friend Simon Pierce, who's just an amazing editor, technically and creatively. And he's come in to look at my edit and go, right, we don't need this, we don't need that. We can shorten that, we can tweak this, and he's got a great eye for that. So yeah, I've done like the first pass, and then he's come in and gone, right, we need to change all this and tweak that, and everything, he says is gold. So I really trust him, and it's great. He's a great collaborator as well. So yeah, I'm really loving this, the progress.
Excellent. I was thinking, because I saw some of the stuff you tweeted out, because your effects guys are using Blender. Which used to be a nightmare to use, but the last couple of years has become a dream to use. And in about a few years' time, it's going to be an industry standard, because it's so versatile as a piece of software, and it's free to use for most people, just what you can play around with it. So if you had to play around with it yourself to see what you can...
I haven't. My visual effects supervisor, Al Brett, he uses it, and I delved in. I dabbled in visual effects about 15 years ago, and I was on 3D Max and a couple of other, 3D Max and After Effects, and I really enjoyed it. But I realized it wasn't my forte, and I needed you really need to delve into it deep to know how to use it. So what that did was that gave me a foundation of knowing the process and what happens, and I could talk the language. So then when I'm working with Al, I can say, well, could we mask that and key that out, and let's feather that a little bit, and what texture are you using on that map to, all in Blender and stuff, and we can talk the language, which is great. And we working with Invisible Man. We've got some new, well, it's not new technology in the industry, but it's new technology to us, where we're working with HDRI maps to kind of light the scene, which is really great. So on set, we're taking a 360-degree photo of the environment on set, and then we're using that image to light our CG elements, which make them look a bit more photoreal. And then we're using some motion capture as well. So we've got a motion capture suit, a bit like they would use in like Planet of the Apes and things like that. So we can put the suit on, and you, as an avatar, a man moving on the computer, that then we can dress in a coat or create shadows and all that kind of stuff. So, and I've been playing the Invisible Man, which is great. So we're working with it on the other day. We've got this suit on, and I'm walking down the street, which is basically our visual effects guy's front room, and I'm shivering or I'm reaching for something, and then our 3D character is doing that. And then when we put our CG snow falling in the scene, it will fall on our outline of our man, our Invisible Man walking down the street and things. So we're doing that, which is all new to us, which is great fun. So and Blender being such a versatile piece of software, it merges quite well with After Effects, and our motion capture suite has a plug-in, so it can talk to our suit and all that kind of stuff. So it's all great and it all works well together. So it's quite challenging, but I'm really enjoying it. It's great fun.
Yeah, well, you will learn so much from this movie as well.
Oh, without doubt.
Because it looks, I mean, I've looked at some of the stuff you've been working on. There's effects in it, but nothing really it comes to the level of the stuff I think you're doing with this movie. I think it's going to be a big jump up effects wise.
Right, hopefully.
What they're saying in the chat here, they're arguing about period movies, but they're only really yeah. Star says he loves a good period movie. They tend to age better in the long run. Yeah, except the ones made in the 70s. Everybody's got side chops, but
Yeah.
Curly hair on top. And yeah, my monkey uses Blender. Yeah, we have a talented bunch that turn up for Team Dark. I had a wee smile there when you mentioned Planet of the Apes, because usually I'm the person that mentions Planet of the Apes, and I always go, oh, he's going a bit Planet of the Apes again. That's what.
I love those movies. I love visual effects, and I love visual effects movies, and I will really defend CG and visual effects movies, and I think the amount of work that's involved, and they get, I don't know what it is, they get such a bad rap where people say practical's better, and all you got to do is press F7 on a computer and you get your dinosaur and the computer does it all now, and it's just pure 100% ignorance. The amount of work that a CG artist has to know and understand. I mean, when I'm working with Al, you have to understand light. You have to understand texture. You have to understand, how the light is going to come through the bottom of my earlobe here more at the bottom than it is at the top, and all these sorts of things that an artist needs to understand.
Yeah,
and the computer will only do what you tell it to do.
Yeah,
and there's so much work to be done, and whether you like it or not, it's visual effects are here to stay, and it's quicker, and it sometimes is easier. Because you can make a decision later in the day and go, do you know what? I want more snow, or I want less of that, or more of that, rather than sort of having to commit to it. And a lot of our visual effects we had to do because we couldn't afford to do it practically.
Yep.
I know I can put snow in a scene for one shot, and it cost me an hour, or I could spend $2,500 to get a special effects supervisor there on the day, do some practical snow, which then our crew has to spend 2 hours cleaning up. It's a no-brainer. And I think for one shot I can make it look real, and that's the way it's going now in the future, and especially on a movie like Invisible Man, we have to adopt that. But then we are doing practical effects as well. We've got the fishing wire opening doors and all that kind of stuff, and that's great fun.
I think it's marrying the two together. It's getting it to work in such a way. And people are slagging off CG, is because there's so much bad CG out there to slag off. That's what it is. They often don't even notice the good stuff.
No.
A bit like even when they do notice something like in The Hobbit or The Lord of the Rings, where you've got Schmeagol, what's his name? It's fake, but the performance is so good coming through it. And the artists working on tweaking it have done such a good job that you suspend your disbelief. And I think that goes back to the Ray Harryhausen approach. They're not real. That they're manipulated models that are being animated, but there's a quality to the work being done that has again, what you were talking about earlier, it's got a human quality to it, and a depth to the work that the animators bring into it that you can then suspend your disbelief. So I think that's people's main problem with CGI, is a lot of it's so slapdash that
it can be. I mean, I'll tell you, one of the things that I tell my students, if anyone's listening, you could go on YouTube and Google Mamma Mia visual effects breakdown. Now, the musical Mamma Mia with Meryl Streep, where they're on this Greek island and they're all singing and dancing in the villas and walking down the beach and singing on the pier, and you watch the visual effects breakdown, and they're in a studio against a blue screen. They're in a boat on a blue screen, and the VFX and the compositing is so good, you think they're on this Greek island, and they're not. They're in Pinewood, and it's a blue screen, and there's a little villa set, and you're just like, it blows your mind. That's a massive visual effects movie. Because Meryl Streep singing, and it's relationships and it's romantic, you don't go, oh, CG. You go, hey, a musical, that's great.
Indeed, but they still couldn't auto-tune Pierce Brosnan.
No.
Other than that, the visual effects were great. But that's right. Because even I was watching For Your Eyes Only a couple of weeks ago, and I was thinking the same thing with the Derek Medding stuff and the model effects. And the only thing that makes it obvious is the water every now and then, because you just can't miniaturize water. But everything else is just spot on. It's just fantastic. It just looks so much better when they blow it up.
Indeed. Everything's pushed back these days, even TV digital. Is in contract. Absolutely.
If I was an actor, I'd make sure it was in my contract. Right. I'm going to ask you now about genres. You've dabbled in so many different genres, even just like straight drama with the work that you're doing. And I'm looking at the next one you're doing, Breathe. Is that one that you're working on after this?
Yeah, that's on the pipeline. There's another. In fact, what we're hoping to do before that is a Western.
Oh, right.
Which is actually a supernatural Western. So we're mixing two genres. And we're hoping to do that kind of early next year.
So are you making where are you making the Western?
It's in Almeria in Spain.
Yeah, so I was thinking, so it's got a wee bit of the roots of the European Westerns back in the day.
In fact, we're actually going to be filming in the town that they built for A Fistful of Dollars.
Excellent.
And that town's still there. So I went over and visited it 18 months ago and spoke to them and looked around the set and looked around the town and I want to shoot there. It's awesome. And in fact, I had a moment. I visited the town on my birthday, so I was sat in the saloon having a whiskey. Right, so you'll appreciate that. And there was tourists there. You have your visitors because it's a tourist attraction. And I timed it perfectly just by chance that I walked out of these swinging doors in the saloon, and I stood looking out into the square. And they have these kind of actors, stunt guys that do these walk arounds with the horse and cart and the cowboys. And I just saw this cowboy come around the corner. Then this horse and cart sort of stopped and some dust kicked up, and there was no members of the public. There was no tourists for that particular 2 or 3 minutes. And I was in 1885, stood in this Western town. These doors are swinging. And I was just looking around going, oh, my God, I've gone back in time. This is awesome. Yeah. And I was just enjoying the moment. And then I think this family of 4 walked around the corner with pink T-shirts on, eating ice creams. And it blew the whole thing out of the water. And it all sort of blew my experience. But it's just an awesome set. So that's what we're looking at. The script's written. It's a supernatural thing about a woman that goes into this saloon and she wants to hire this someone to take her to this town called Progress, because her sister's been kidnapped by this gang, and they're holding her sister for ransom because she's from a rich family. And the sister hires this cowboy, and the cowboy goes, okay, I'll take you because no one else wants to take you. And the reason they don't want to take her, or no one wants to go to this town called Progress, is because it's haunted. It's been abandoned for years. But this gang are there waiting to do this ransom and this transaction. So you have this gang of holding this woman for ransom, and they keep getting picked off by these ghosts. And we know our heroes are on the way to try and rescue her sister going into this town. And it's a very kind of, the way we're pitching it is kind of like Raiders meets Ghostbusters. So it's kind of a family orientated, fun, feel good, with supernatural elements. So that's hopefully what the next film's going to be.
Excellent. Yeah, I'd seen those images on your website. I believe the website's in the description below if you guys want to visit at any point and see what Paul's been up to, and you can even watch the entire first 2 seasons of Horizon.
Oh yeah, that's on there.
Yeah, because I've been giving that a wee look as well, and that looked like a hell of a show to put together. Yeah, you looked in your face when I mentioned it, was all like, whoa, what stuff. I mean, do you want to talk about that? Because we're talking about, was it 16 episodes?
20, I think, yeah.
20 episodes, because it's great, because you've got the wee making ofs next to it as well. And you've got like yourself and the 2 other guys you worked with that were taking turns in writing and putting together the episodes. How did that come about? That was because that was like 5-6 years ago. You made that.
Yeah, 2015 was the first one. Well, my friend who I mentioned earlier, Sai, who's our editor, we sort of sat down and we went, "Oh, it'd be great to make one of those episodic TV shows," because we'd made short films, we'd made a couple of features, but having that episodic show where you could have a cliffhanger at the end of the episode before tuning in, and at the time we made it, it was Walking Dead and Lost, those types of shows, and you would have that. Someone would get killed or someone would be stood in the doorway and the music would swell, it would cut and the episode would finish. And what we wanted to do was make these episodes that we decided to release nightly. We had a website made up where each episode, which was only a short bite-sized 10 minutes long or 5 minutes long, and it would be unlocked at 8 o'clock every night. So you would tune in, watch it, and then you would have to wait another 24 hours for the next episode. But the show was about 5 friends based in Bristol, and an alien ship arrives on the horizon, and no one knows why it's there. No one knows what's happening, and these 5 friends just try and get out of the city. So there's looting, and there's heroes and there's villains, and some people are missing, so they've got to go off and find them, and that kind of thing. And we ended the season on a bit of a cliffhanger. And about a year later, we kind of said, well, look, what we're doing, we're going to have to finish the show. So we're going to have to write season 2. So we set up a Kickstarter, tried to raise some money, which we got about half. And then we made the second season. But what happened was we had all these ideas and they just grow and grow and grow. We kind of realized we used to use the term like the train left the station, where we had to commit to it. And it ended up costing a lot of money personally for Simon and me. But then we learned so much, and it was a great show to make. And we ended up wrapping up the whole thing with season 2. So we did another 10 episodes, which went out nightly, which was great. And what was really good for us was that we would have all the shows, on Twitter and Facebook, people commenting. They would take a screen grab of a shot in the movie, in the episode, and circle it and go, "Oh, what's that mark on his neck? And what's this guy doing? I think this is happening." And then I would get messages on Facebook going, "Oh, hi, I'm really enjoying your show." And I would email back going, "Oh, great. Who do you know that's in it? Or how are you connected?" And she goes, "Oh, no one. I've just found it online. I'm a 55-year-old housewife from Nottingham." I'd be like, brilliant. The fact that you found our show and you're enjoying it and you reached out. In my head, it was just people that we knew. Like, it was my parents and my sister.
That's always what you... That's always what you think when you're doing something. That's what I thought when I started doing my comics. Who's going to like these? But then people do, and they tell you.
Yeah, and it's great that we had that kind of feedback, and people are really enjoying it. So that's what Horizon was all about, and we learned a lot. We learned a lot from that show.
It's a terrific looking show. It really is. Say hello to the wise guys who's joined us. He's at work just now, in the good old US of A. So I think it was Pete Bakewell was asking, so it's like, based on that experience, I don't know, I might know the answer to this. Would you think of doing something similar but horror based, like a sequential sort of like show like that?
I'm interested in doing the horror thing, but not necessarily in a show. I think I've kind of done that. I mean, the next step up, if you're going to do something episodic, would be a full-length show, like a 10-part series for Netflix, and each show would be 40-50 minutes long, which obviously is triple the output of what we're doing at the moment to do a feature or whatever. But that's certainly an option. Yeah, that's something that we could do if the right idea came along. And it's funny how you've got all these ideas, like they're talking about the Western, there's something else that we're looking to do next year. And it's one of those things where you're going, well, actually, that's the next 2 years of my life taken up. So if someone came into, with a script now, you would go, well, yeah, we can look at it, but it's going to be 2023 before, you know what I mean?
Exactly.
Unless we bumped a few things. And unfortunately, with the Western, we have a window to film there between November and Easter, because that's when they're closed to the public. And if we go past Easter, that's when they're open to the public. So we'd have to wait another year before we could shoot there again. So nothing from a horror perspective episodically, but a horror feature, absolutely. In fact, we're planning something else which may or may not be one of the other Universal monsters.
Whoa, may or may not be. Okay, right, okay. The chat will be trying to figure out that one. Especially not my monkey. I brought that up because that made me laugh. But so it may or may not. So okay. Well, I mean, here's a big question for left field. Who's your favourite Universal monster?
Well, I got to say Invisible Man, but I'm partial to the Wolfman. Actually, I must be honest. I do like the Wolfman.
The Wolfman is mine. Yeah, I think the Wolfman is mine.
Dracula's great as well. You know.
Yeah. They are all great. I think but just watching them as a kid, it was always the Wolfman for me. It was always I don't know why. Maybe it was because he was Welsh. No, it didn't look like Wales to me. Definitely didn't look like Wales. But watching them on the kind of like the double bills of the BBC late night, it's essentially just watching the entire Universal horror movies week by week. Over a few months as a kid. It was a great experience. But so yeah.
I do like. I mean, Invisible Man I do like as well. I think, and that's why when the Invisible Man sort of came to me, I was quite chuffed. I think because before the contemporary movie that came out, which Lee Whannell directed last year or year before, there's been other Invisible Mans, but nothing necessarily big or or a period. But yeah, I don't know. There's always something, and I think because Dracula had been done quite a few times, Frankenstein's been done quite a few times. So yeah, I was quite interested in the Invisible Man when it came my way, and it's just as well from a visual effects standpoint, just kind of what we can do with that and how you can.
Yeah.
And also, I think is always one of those things as well. My producer and I were chatting about this, where as a kid, you always had that fantasy of what would you do if you were invisible.
Yeah.
Where would you go? Would you listen into that conversation, or, what would you do?
Exactly. Stato's right here. When you watch their movies, they just go from one genre to the next with the Invisible Man stuff. So it's not a case of sticking to horror. So it's as a kind of like a protagonist or antagonist in a movie, it's very diverse. There's stuff you can do with it. Monkey's still trying to guess which character you're going to be doing. She-Wolf of London, is it?
No, good. I don't know. Yeah, I love all of them. They're all good fun, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, Hammer did not do the Invisible Man, did they?
I don't believe so.
Yeah, that's because when they had that was because they started off by doing their versions of these characters, and then I think maybe effects wise it was just too much for Hammer to attempt at the time. Maybe if they're.
I mean, that's it. I mean, it's we had that issue with Invisible Man where it's like you have to do more than just this voice that you hear. There has to be some kind of physical interaction that he's causing. So in our movie, we tried to do things like, we have the snow which falls on him, or there's breath, or there's footprints, fog. Just so there's some kind of outline. And I think I went through the whole script, and I think we've got 2 scenes where we hear him. We only hear him because there's one scene where we just hear him, and then we make a thing of the fact that we only just hear him rather than there's any physical thing. And even we have, he's laid on the bed. You see the indents in the bed and that kind of thing. There has to be something physical that the audience can sort of hang on to a little bit. Otherwise, it just becomes cheap. And I think the audience is going to go, yeah, you just got a guy in a microphone in the edit suite doing his lines. And there needs to be something proving that he's in the scene. You know. So we've just finished something now, not giving away spoilers. We was doing the visual effects yesterday of the Invisible Man walking through the fog, and then he's strangling someone. So we have the marks on his neck where you see the indents on the neck, and the skin goes a bit white where the fingers are on it, and then there's a red marking around his neck. So you have to have some physical thing rather than just your actor going like that. You have to have the imprints. So and that was a big nightmare because visual effects wise we're tracking the actor's neck with these indents you know, and the light and the shadow and all that kind of thing. So it's great fun. But yeah, it's just having that approach to having something physical in the scene, which was a great challenge.
Excellent. How much of the H.G. Wells story is involved in the development of this, or is it just inspired by?
It's kind of inspired because I think in the original story, H.G. Wells's book, the Invisible Man Griffin turns up at Dr. Kemp's house and sort of terrorizes and says to Kemp, look, you're going to house me while I do my reign of terror around the city. But in our story, it's slightly removed from that Dr. Kemp is dead and his wife is his widow that lives in the house. And
right.
She has a history with Griffin as well, the three of them. So there's a little bit of the Invisible Man's kind of got an attraction to her. So there's an attraction, there's a romance angle there. Plus, you know, you've got the husband that is obviously deceased. So the Invisible Man's wearing his clothes. So it's a little bit awkward for her. And she's a woman who's trying to fight for her place in society against a load of men basically trying to push her down and keep her in her place. So there's a lot to talk about really as well. Oh, I think we've lost Wullie there. I think he's going to come back any minute. We're just looking at the comments here. I don't think the mummy's been done properly yet. No, it hasn't. Not really.
You're okay. You're okay. Something. You're okay. Yeah, I did warn you, didn't, or something, but I was okay there. We never totally crashed.
It's all good.
Sorry, I missed the last like 20 seconds.
No. It's all good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're just talking about the fact that it's our story is kind of like we have a heroine kind of female lead in our story, which is great. And the Invisible Man's kind of has a lot of scenes with her, rather than the original H.G. Wells book. It's her husband that's kind of having to deal with the Invisible Man.
Yeah, I started was well prepped. He's got the questions ready in case I did actually not get back in time.
Which, how long until the film's released? Well, I don't know. I can't really answer that. I think we might be looking at about April, May. It depends when when distribution comes on board and looks at all of that. But we're just still in the process of doing all the effects. Really, it's gone for a refill.
You know me, Monkey. I don't need to go anywhere for a refill. That was a good question. There's not as much a question as Monkey doesn't think the mummy has been done properly yet. I like the Boris Karloff mummy and I like the Christopher Lee mummy.
Yeah. I mean, I think the one before the Tom Cruise one, what did we have? Brendan Fraser, wasn't it? Back in 1980?
Yeah. The first one of those was pretty good fun.
Yeah, it was all right.
It was a cross between like a horror movie and a Indiana Jones movie.
Yeah. So that was okay. I mean, the whole Dark Universe thing that they tried to start with the Tom Cruise mummy didn't really take off.
I still haven't seen that. It's one of those ones that I don't know if I want to watch or not.
Yeah.
It's the whole idea of starting a universe before you've actually made a movie. You know, I think it's just doomed to failure. Yeah. I think that was the case with them.
No, it didn't quite work. And I think the writer on that, one of the writers, Christopher McQuarrie, was saying that, I think on Twitter, he said they basically shot the first draft, or it felt like they shot the first draft, and then they released the first cut. It wasn't finessed in the script or in the edit to really make it kind of work.
Yeah.
And
there's a lot of people involved as well, wasn't there? I think there's a lot of hands involved in putting it together, and suits involved in putting it together.
Yeah, it just didn't quite take off. And I don't know about Tom Cruise being an ensemble thing. I mean, he's obviously got a Mission Impossible franchise, which is great, but he's still the lead in that. But being part of like sharing the screen with other, Johnny Depp and Russell Crowe and all that, I don't know if that fits with him. I don't know.
I don't know, because he's one of the last actual movie stars that's out there that he sells a movie on his face alone, being on the poster. So I don't know if it would actually be good for him in the long run. Because you look at people like Robert Downey Jr. He was like he at least a life doing what he was doing. Maybe part of the Marvel universe. But your man doesn't need that.
No, he hasn't.
Yeah, let's get Top Gun coming out again. I don't know. Yeah, we haven't seen a Creature from the Black Lagoon remake.
No, I'm sure it's coming. I'm sure it's coming.
Yep.
Yeah.
And yeah, there is. There's loads that people can do with looking into Egyptian mythology, and there's quite a few horror movies that pick up on it and have it as stuff in the background.
Yeah,
which is always good. Yeah, I watched one of the other Universal Mummy ones, the Mummy's Hand. One of the sequels.
Right.
Yeah, and they're all interchangeable. They're not very good, to be honest with you, but they're also just about 70 minutes long, so they're quite easy to sit through.
Yeah, they are.
So they are quite good fun to watch.
Yeah. They're all like back then. They're all about an hour 10. I don't know why.
Yeah, I know. Well, after this thing, I think the perfect movie is about 90 minutes.
Yeah.
That's not to say I don't like Lawrence of Arabia and all that kind of stuff, because
sure.
but I think if you can tell the story, especially like a horror movie, for a horror movie and a comedy, I think specifically you want to keep it to that.
Yeah.
Because it gets a bit tired and jumping and laughing after 90 minutes.
It does.
You're going to spend so long on a roller coaster before you want to get off. Really? I say.
And I think it's funny, the horror genre. I think it can be very hard to do. I think it's there's very few. I'm trying to think of the movies that I like. Some of the horror perspective. And my favorite, I think, probably the Fly remake, the Jeff Goldblum movie. And I even got a soft spot actually for Pet Sematary back in the day. Because they had a family at the base of it, and I just love I don't know. It was. I think those, especially the Fly, things that have the character, the progression, and the horror comes from the story, and it comes from the characters and their interaction, rather than it just being. I don't know. I've never been one necessarily to do those movies where you take 6 students and take them off to a cottage, and something exists there, and I don't know. I've never been. I don't know. You have to do that really, really well, and I think it's. I see a lot of trailers in the cinema, and there'll be a couple that move into this house, and it's some being that lives there, or something's there in the house, and the poster tagline says they should have never moved in, and it's like, okay, and I'm watching it in the cinema, going, I've seen that film, I've done it. Like, I don't know. I need something else. There needs to be something besides that, that draws me in.
Yeah, I know what you mean. You see, I think it's a trope people fall into. I think when they make a low budget horror movie, and they always think they'll look at Texas Chainsaw Massacre or something. They'll say, "This is what you do. You get a van, you get a Scooby van, you put half a dozen young folk in it, and they don't really need these people to be there for any other reason other than to kill them or put them in a situation where they're going to be scared." I agree with you in Pet Sematary. I to this day I still like the first Pet Sematary movie. I think it was a really, really good film. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah. I thought it was great, and because at the base of it, like, you've got this family, and then the boy gets run over. There's the grief that they know what they're doing is wrong, so they still bury the boy, and he comes back. And it's not just this demon chasing around the house; it's their son or whatever, and it can be really affecting. And something that I haven't seen a lot recently, actually, but I really loved it at the time, was the Blair Witch Project. And I remember watching that, and I came out of the cinema going, okay, yeah, I didn't quite get it. And I was driving home, and I got onto the slip road of the motorway, and the ending clicked, and I got it. And I've never, ever had this feeling before, but the hairs on the back of my neck went up, and I had that kind of cold shiver, like I just had some bad news. And I was like, and it hit me. And that was it. Kind of, it broke the paradigm at the time. It broke the format. I mean, they haven't really, it's been copied many times since, but it was something different,
Yeah. I understand that. I never did it for me. But I can understand why people liked it and what they got out of it. But I wish I'd felt that way too, because I love horror movies, but it never did just get. I was just like that a wee bit. Sometimes you got to be in the right frame of mind for movies. That's the case.
I haven't seen it since. It's one of those things. It might have been an of the time thing. I loved it, and I watch it now, and I might be like, it doesn't quite hold up. Or
because we do this. I mean, we do this thing where we'll rank movies every now and then and argue over them. was Cyborg really that good? That kind of thing. And I was thinking, like, we're doing the Full Moon movies next, right? And so that the Puppet Masters, Trancers, all that kind of stuff. And
right.
you can't objectively look at a lot of the movies they put out and say they're actually very good. You know, you can't. But some of them, as a video rental, when you're a certain age, you know, and you put them in and you watch them, they're fun. And that makes a big difference. I think so in a lot of cases, like how you see films and how you kind of like how they fit into your culture at that time.
Absolutely.
Is really important. So we we'll argue over movies, and myself and Lucifer do video nasties. We're doing a series on the video nasties kind of every now and then. The next one we're going to watch Zombie Creeping Flesh and do a show on that. And I haven't seen that since I rented it on VHS. You know, I say rented, it was under the counter rental back in the day. You know, so that's going to be interesting because we've watched a few of them, and you're watching them and you're going, "Oh my god." What am I watching? Brilliant. And then in some cases you're like, that's actually really good. You know, this is actually a really good film.
What you just said then is absolutely right. If it connects with you at that time in your life, and it has it becomes, it's a bit. It becomes a gem. You have a bit of a soft spot for it, and when you watch it, later, perhaps that might have faded a little bit, or you might, it might rekindle that. But I think, so sometimes they're of the time and of the place, but they all have their merits, don't they?
Yeah. Stato's getting ready for that show already. He's ready to defend them every corner. He's right. Yeah, yes. Like, they're out there so very good at knowing what they can do with no budget.
Yeah.
and just having one good director to kind of create a kind of house style like Stuart Gordon did with just a few movies can go a long way.
Yeah.
Who stylistically do you look to? Is there anybody? Do you like the more naturalistic style of filmmaker, or do you like the kind of the more Hitchcockian sort of like the ones that play around with the camera, that kind of thing?
I don't know. I think if it's done well, like ones that play around with the camera, De Palma springs to mind. He does some great stuff. With his long takes, and as long as you're not drawn to it from a point of view of it's not show offy, but it's done, kind of to immerse, bring you into the movie. But I mentioned Ridley Scott earlier, and I like his approach. I like his style, and his brother Tony. I think Tony was great at what they do. And it's all quite flashy and colourful in places, but there's definitely a style there. And they know what they're doing. They're masters of their craft. But I've always been a big fan as well of like Zemeckis and his work and the way he approaches stuff. There's some lovely stuff and like What Lies Beneath. Again, single takes and long takes and things that might bring. I don't know. I think when he shot What Lies Beneath, Zemeckis said something like, "I wanted to make the movie that Hitchcock would have made if he was alive." So there's a lot of those. The framing was really good. So I think it's those that I'm not too keen on those that want to show off too much. And you almost, if you on the second or third viewing, you realize what you've been watching. It's affected you. And then the second time or third time you watch it, you're able to analyze it a bit more and break it down and go, oh wow, I realize we haven't cut yet, or whatever it might be. Or what the lighting's doing, or why, I don't know. So I think those are the sort of directors that I'm you're kind of drawn to.
Yeah, cool. I'm a big Brian De Palma fan. He's one of the few ones that can be flashy and clever and get away with it, because he learned from working with Hitchcock, of course. Same as the last one of these things you see as a kid and it stays with you, and it still has at least 2 or 3 scenes in it that are still genuinely creepy, especially for a TV show back in the 70s. So
I mean, I just thinking there, but you mentioned it earlier. What was it? Texas Chainsaw. I remember the feeling after I watched Texas Chainsaw Massacre it was I don't know, it was like a sick, twisted feeling, like someone had just twisted my gut. It's not a jumpy scare movie. It's not a cover your eyes movie. It's just, you come away feeling I've eaten raw chicken, and you know, there's that scene where they wheel the grandfather in and he's sucking on the girl's finger, and that's the sort of horror that you go, they've found that in to the it makes everyone kind of look away without it being sort of gruesome, as it were.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I saw it first on probably a pirate videotape from under the counter. And I think that's probably the best way to see it first, because tidied up on DVD or Blu-ray, that it loses a little bit of the grungy quality.
Right.
You know, like a second or third generation VHS gives it, when you're kind of looking at it, oh my God, what am I looking at here? But the thing that got me was the sound design and the screaming and the sudden sounds when you've actually did get them. And to me, that's what really worked. And it kind of had me kind of on edge, you know, along with just this sense that everything was real. No matter how ridiculous it was, you believed it. And it's kind of hard to pull that off. Even on a big budget, it's kind of hard to pull that off.
Yeah, absolutely.
Toby Hooper. Life Force is, I believe, a forgotten masterpiece, which will be rediscovered in years to come. I'm sure there's many people who agree with me. we got Lucifer to watch that recently. Never seen it. It's not
Poltergeist as well.
And Poltergeist as well. Yeah. But, I don't know about Invaders from Mars. I haven't seen that for many years. His remake of that. I'll give that one another go too.
Right.
So is there anything you'd like to mention that you're going to be working on that you've not covered that the chat might be interested in?
No, I think I've covered it all. We've got Wrap It Up Invisible. We're trying to start the Western, and I mean, I don't know. I really want to do a lot more genre movies now. I did a lot of short films that were dramas, you know, and then I did make a horror film about 10 years ago that took me 10 years to finish, which a friend of mine wrote, called We May Be Shadows, which is you can find on my website. I think I've uploaded it.
Yeah, that's a nice creepy piece. I watched that.
And it was it was a different thing for me because my friend Will wrote it, and I think he told me he was in a really dark place when he wrote it, and there's no redeeming features about the movie. Like, there's no character you're rooting for, there's no heart, there's nothing. It's just this darkness inside, you know, people, and that was a really interesting project to do because the middle act was green screen, so it was a big visual effects thing for us. But yeah, you know, kind of I'm just moving toward genre stuff now. I think it's more fun, really, and I think it's really important to make sure you have the fun. You know?
I think what's good about genre as well is you can actually deal with themes in a lot more in a more universal way. That might kind of that will be able to speak to people in a much wider way as well. So if you end up getting your films dubbed or subtitled or whatever, you know, I think genre helps for as wide an audience as possible. I've always had the feeling though that in the UK there's maybe a slight snootiness about genre stuff. I don't know, is that still the case?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we're doing a lot more, but I think we're kind of, you know, we're known for the sort of kitchen sink dramas or the period movies or whatever. But I think, you know, there's a lot of good action directors. There's a lot of good horror directors. You know what I mean? And I think, why can't we do that stuff? You know? And I think I don't know. I'm a big believer in the stuff I want to make and the stuff I want to watch. Personally, is just that it must entertain.
Yeah.
And
it's amazing how easily people forget that though when they're making something.
Like above all, everything else, it has to entertain. That's the first thing, and if you're not entertained, you failed, really, I think, you know.
I mean, you look at some of the hardest films to watch or to get your head around, films like Taxi Driver, they still entertain, you know. They still kind of like pull you along with the characters and kind of thrill you with what Scorsese's doing visually.
Is it engaging?
No, I think you've lost it, Monkey.
You're
getting them mixed up. I think you're getting them mixed up with Saul Bass, who did the storyboards for the scene. I think that's where you're probably getting them mixed up with that. So, because he was meticulous, Hitchcock, and made sure everything was storyboarded out for these kind of long sequences and that. And Saul Bass's storyboards, you probably, because you teach film studies yourself, you probably You probably used them at some point or talked about them at some point with students, I would imagine.
Yeah. Covered a lot. I've been teaching for 16, 17 years. So yeah, covered a lot there, really. Yeah. Funny enough, bringing up Psycho, this is a hot take, I have a really big soft spot for Psycho 2.
So do I. Yes.
I mean, it's Anthony Perkins' performance is mind-blowing. I think it's amazing.
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of 2.
I love it. I absolutely love it.
I do actually quite like all the movies in that franchise because they are so different and odd and weird. Yeah. And they don't. You can always just take the original as its own as a Hitchcock movie. It seems to me it's almost like the franchise starts with the second movie.
Yeah.
And then you can go with them if you want to. So yeah, but no, big fan of 2. I think. I think we've talked. Me and Stato have talked about doing a show on the Psycho movies at some point. Yeah. There's so much for us to do. We're doing the Daniel Craig Bonds next. So
brilliant.
Yeah, well, we're doing Tim Burton first. Next week, we're going to be doing Tim Burton's Batman films. And then we're moving on to Daniel Craig Bonds. We've done Connery, we've done the Mighty Lazenby, we've done Moore. We've done everybody now. We're on to Daniel Craig.
Great. I love the Bonds.
So, So I hate Skyfall, so it's going to be a fun show. I'm going to watch it again. I might not hate it. I might because I watch movies later on in life, and my opinions do change quite drastically. And I'll think, why did I not see that the first time I watched it? You know, it's interesting that you watch maybe go, and I kind of get what people liked in that movie. So I'm going to give Skyfall another go, and see if it was just a bad experience when I watched it the first time.
It might well be. I mean, I have that. I watch a film and I go, what was I thinking when I first watched this? Like, I loved it when I first saw it, but now someone snuck in and changed my DVD and swapped it out for something else. Or I love it and I'm like, I just must have been in a bad mood or a different frame of mind, or it wasn't what I was expecting. Now watching it again, I know what to expect or whatever. But that's not the film's fault for not being what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Exactly, because that's one thing you can fall into that trap. A lot of reviewers do these days of reviewing the film in their head, rather than the film that was made. I miss the reviews for the old days. You used to get people like John Brosnan and Alan Jones and that writing for magazines, and they kind of knew what they were talking about. So even if they didn't like a movie, they were educated in why they didn't like the movie. And nowadays everybody's a reviewer. Yeah. So
unfortunately, kind of film Twitter.
That's it. But Twitter's a good place to be.
Yeah,
it's just don't say anything controversial, you'll be fine.
Brilliant.
So yeah, the Psycho sequels are pretty underrated. So yeah, that's us then, guys. That's us. We're just going over now. I like to keep these to around about an hour. So a big thanks to Paul for coming on tonight and talking about what he's working on, what he's been doing. I did prep him beforehand that I might disappear and be kicked off my own show. So he was well prepped for that. It happens quite a lot. Yeah.
No problem.
If Lucifer's here, he has a guitar handy and then he just sings a song for everybody. You know, Stato regales them with stories. It does happen. So thanks for coming on. When Fear the Invisible Man is out there, we'll have given it a look anyway. You've got an invitation at any point if you want to come in, show the trailer, talk about it, and give it a week and a boost. We'll help you do that. So please do.
Thank you.
And to everybody in the chat, Stato, Not My Monkey, Wise Guys, Ashen, whoever's watching us out there on Facebook, and we now have 3 of you out there on Twitch that occasionally watch us out there in the Twitcherverse. Thanks for joining us tonight. I've not got an outro because I had trouble with the last one. I kept getting copyright things when I used it, and it was Plan 9 from outer space. Seemingly the music in the sequence is copyrighted, so I'm not going to use that. So we're just going to recreate the end of an old Police Squad episode. Say goodnight, do a freeze frame, and then we'll see all you guys on Tuesday night for the Team Dark and Draw stream. I'm going to be drawing Also Dark live again, like we did last week, and I'll be here next week with Stato, and we'll be looking at Batman and Batman Returns. Have they aged well?
Yes.
Yes, well, there you go. Okay, thanks very much, Paul. It's been a pleasure. See you guys. Catch you all on the intro.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.